Adaptations. Easy to screw up and screwed up often.
Boom.
But the transition from manga to anime has always been pretty interesting to me. With adapting something like a novel into a movie, for example, you lose a lot in translation for a multitude of reasons. But the medium of manga fulfills many of the necessary elements behind the medium of anime. Some adaptations are even direct recreation, shot for shot, and those are fine, yeah. Adaptations like these hold a lot of respect and love for their source material, which is awesome, but you know what? Sometimes change is a good thing. And in the case of Gakkou Gurashi's adaptation, I think it's an amazing thing. So much is altered purely for the sake of enhancing the story, or at least at an attempt to do so. It's a risky choice, but it resulted in the creation of an experience I would not soon forget. Also one that I would not hesitate to tell all of you about whenever I get a chance to. But before I get into the nitty-gritty, I should warn you, from this point forward I'll be spoiling major plot points that take place in the anime, as well as volumes 1 through 5 in the manga. Got it? Good.
All kids out of the pool for adult swim. All kids out!
While this video is mostly about what I think was improved upon in the anime, the manga has its own selling points too. Depending on how you feel about the intentionally juxtaposing themes in the anime, you may actually find the manga more your speed. There's more cohesiveness between the story's darker and lighter themes, I think partially due to the absence of color. The manga's art also tends to be more gritty as well, giving us more detailed shots. The art in general is actually very nice. I particularly like how certain panels are framed, and I love the visual storytelling. The expressiveness in the faces are also really notable, especially when the characters are experiencing some sort of mental trauma or fatigue. I think it also bears mentioning that when there is action, the panels flow from one to another pretty damn well. It's easy to follow as well as quick. No lengthy dialogue bubbles breaking the pace of these scenes. Actually, in terms of text, that's also something used in a cool way, nearly dominating entire panels sometimes. Though this may just speak to how little I read manga, as it could be a more common thing than I realize. As far as the actual story goes, I love how specific things are handled. We get a little further insight into areas the anime didn't focus on as much, as well as scenarios I was happy to see explored. There's a lot I enjoyed, in fact. I haven't listed it all here for the sake of brevity, but I am hoping you can gather that I actually really do like it. I want to make that clear, as I have much to say and praise about the anime. The changes made are some of the biggest reasons I fell in love with the series in the first place, starting immediately in fact with episode 1. Now, despite how people may feel about Gakkou Gurashi as a whole, I think it's generally accepted that the first episode's hook is the most iconic moment from the show, luring us into believing a facade only to reveal that we've been lied to for about 20 minutes. 20 minutes packed with foreshadowing, carefully placed details, and moments that are recontextualized after we learn what is truly going on. And despite the manga being able to utilize a juxtaposing page turn in its reveal, it does not bring anywhere near the same level of impact or detail the anime does. First of all, an effective twist needs to feel satisfying. The audience needs to be fed just enough information for the twist to be consistent with the logic of the story. If it's something that seemingly comes out of nowhere, it's not as satisfying or effective. Sure, after reading a few pages of harmless character interactions and turning the page to see this, it's jarring and surprising, yeah, but so would be confessing that this video is actually about Space Bond! Oh!
Yes!
Oh yeah. The point is, that wouldn't be too satisfying. Second, it's worth mentioning the manner in which this reveal happens. In the manga, Yuki walks into a room and addresses the class. Then after a page turn, we have the true perspective. This is information solely for the reader. We're essentially on the outside looking in, and it's as if things just changed because that's what the author wanted us to see. While in the anime, reviewing most of the episode from Yuki's perspective. This moment that doesn't feature Yuki, for example, has a much different tone. Also, the others that were on the roof with Kurumi and Yuri have disappeared completely. But this example is still a little subtle, and it's not until we share Miki's point of view towards the end where we realize what is going on. It feels more like we're sharing this experience with Miki, as she finds herself very uncomfortable and confused. There's also another layer of depth when you recall how she was behaving all throughout the episode. Because of this, the reveal not only communicates what Yuki is going through, but also what the rest of the cast is going through, at least a lot more clearly. There's also the matter of how much detail is exclusive to the anime. That's not to say there's absolutely nothing in the manga. There's mention of these girls living in the school, this paper taped over the sign, Kurumi's shovel, Yuri and Kurumi not interacting with anyone else. It's all a good starting point. But as for what the adaptation brings to the table, What comes with this level of detail is a demand for the viewer to pay attention. It's something that draws us in and holds us there. This first episode is massively important to the entire series, including the manga. To many, it captures what the show is all about, and this was the hook an obscure series like this needed to gain relevancy. This is why I've spent all this time focusing only on this first episode and this tiny portion of the manga. It's a shining example of how far this adaptation is willing to change and build upon the source material. Okay, so that's episode 1. What else we got? Before I jump in, I feel I should address one thing. I want to reserve my thoughts and feelings on Yuki specifically for a separate video. One, to make sure I'm not rambling for too long, but mostly because I want to spend more time analyzing her as she is my favorite character. I'll make that video sometime in the near future, and when that comes, I'll leave a link to that video here. If you're curious about my general thoughts on her representation in the manga and anime, I feel she's similar enough in both, and I generally like both representations. Anyway, you know how I mentioned the importance of experiencing that scene in episode 1 from Miki's perspective? What's interesting is Miki isn't even present for the entirety of volume 1. Miki is introduced in the manga's second volume, and this volume is focused mainly on her backstory. When I first read the manga, it was after watching the anime, and I initially preferred Miki's story arc in the manga, but I soon realized the reason I enjoyed it was because of that prior knowledge of the character. The anime adaptation includes Miki in the first 3 episodes, before presenting her backstory in episodes 4 and 5. It gives us the knowledge of who Miki is before exposing us to the hardships she encountered, namely being abandoned by her best friend as a result of her own fear and hesitation to venture out into the world. While I love this moment Volume 2 starts in, with Miki losing it after dealing with this horribly mundane and repetitious isolation, it would not affect me nearly as much if I had not already gotten to appreciate her as a character. Not to mention, her relationship with Kei is much more heartbreaking after seeing them slowly grow distant over the course of an entire episode before she leaves. As a result, this moment in Volume 2 will always be trumped by the anime showing Miki distraught, sitting around idly and aimlessly, listening to the CD player Kei left her, and losing it in a similar fashion. If I had gone into the manga first, this moment would likely invoke sympathy more so than empathy. What the anime brought was that little bit of character development leading up to that point. And with the exception of Yuri, who is less developed in the anime by comparison, I'll talk about that later, this willingness to change added a lot of depth to the cast, Kurumi being another great example. Kurumi's arc is still the same overall, but the anime brought a moral conflict to her character. While the manga presents her killing zombies as something she can do without a second thought, with 2 major exceptions, the anime makes the decision much harder. It all spawns from the tragedy of having to kill her crush in an attempt to defend herself. While tragic on its own, it's stressed that Kurumi specifically values romance and is actually a very caring person. The role of the group she's placed in is just that, a role she happens to fit into. She is the most capable and is willing to carry that weight, but what's different in the anime is that despite trying to get into that mindset, Kurumi still proves to be hesitant when thinking of these zombies as people, communicating that she still has this conflict while also foreshadowing an event that comes later. The manga generally showcases moments like these executed without any hesitation, even though I think it's fair to argue Kurumi would be just a teeny bit desensitized after killing someone she cared about. Emotions aren't so black and white. It would make more sense for this complexity in her character to show. Also, if you present the killing as something that doesn't take a second thought, Kurumi may come off as too cold, and it makes her hesitation when she encounters Megane in the manga a little more inconsistent with her character. Not to mention, this undersells the tragic nature of Kurumi's situation. The fact that she falls into a position she clearly has conflict with, yet still attempts to do what needs to be done. It really speaks to both her strengths and weaknesses as a character. And this also stresses the weight she carries and makes the encounter with Megane all the more forgivable as well as saddening. Speaking of Megane, I think it's about damn time we talked about Megane. I believe the adaptation gave us a lot with this character, especially considering that we don't really discover Megane as a part of Yuki's delusion until episode 6. Now, despite how this section, as well as the entire video, may come off, the manga does handle specific things really well, and I want to stress that. I like that there is a focus on Megane's regret, for example. Her effect on Yuki, as well as not showing the evacuation manual to anyone, was what weighed on her mind all the time. It's already heartbreaking to see this character trying their best only to fail, unable to continue looking after everyone, but seeing that she died with a huge weight of regret hits even harder. While I appreciate this, much like in the case of Miki, this is mostly due to how well the anime had invested me in Megane. She is revealed to be a figment of Yuki's imagination by the end of only Volume 1 of the manga. By offering Megane a lot of screen time and backstory, we understand her and what she means to the group a lot better. Even though she's not technically there, she would grow on the viewer like any other member of the cast would. This caring teacher with a soft voice and demeanor felt as real as everyone else, regardless. So when it's officially revealed that she was never there to begin with, it feels like the character had just died. And the following episodes stick to this hard. We never truly see her again, until we wish that we weren't actually seeing her again. It's also worth mentioning the dramatic irony created in the anime. In the manga, there's little to no hinting that anyone will run into Megane. Much like the twist in episode 1, it's revealed in a way that's more shocking than satisfying. But we see these short scenes of Megane as a zombie all throughout the anime. And once it's confirmed that she is indeed gone, we know that her zombie is somewhere in the building. So while the rest of the cast are doing their thing, we're well aware of this additional looming threat and know it's only a matter of time until they encounter it. Not only knowing that this meeting will likely happen, but also outright dreading the thought of what may occur when they do meet. This is the sort of tension I feel the manga lacks by comparison. So you may have noticed a common theme when it comes to the anime's character development. It's kind of awkward to pinpoint exactly where events occur on the manga's timeline. The anime starts at a point where all the characters are together and moves linearly, while borrowing from earlier moments, placing them later, while also looking back on previous events to establish some backstory. Stating that alone isn't even a perfect description. The important takeaway is that the manga moves in a very linear fashion while occasionally presenting flashbacks. The anime follows this, but dedicates a lot more time to its flashbacks, sometimes for entire episodes. This not only allows for more character development, but this deeper exploration also gave us some really solid scenes exclusive to the anime. One in particular I really wanted to gush about, which is the rooftop scene in episode 3. This is easily one of my favorite scenes in the anime. And while it's not fair to judge the manga on things the medium literally doesn't have, which I'm not doing by the way, I do think it's important to look at things like lighting, colors, sound, animation, etc., as they can easily make or break any adaptation. I'll be focusing mainly on the visual and narrative touches, but I actually wanted to bring in a specialist of sorts to help me break down the music and sound design.
Hey, I'm That Music Nerd. I'm a professional composer, and I analyze music.
The setup to the scene is a flashback story, explaining how most of the group came together, as well as establishing the beginning of the zombie crisis. One thing to point out immediately is the time of day this is taking place. It's the twilight. The sun is at an angle that really contrasts the lights from the darks. It also casts this orange tint over everything, and creates an atmosphere where you feel the light is leaving the scene. Things are relaxed for only a moment as the tension of the scene starts with a very anxious phone call, followed by loud and equally anxious knocking.
I think that the spikes in sound design are really interesting. I like that it introduces the music, and I understand why it's super loud and then super quiet, because they have to do it really loud to create that suspense or create that kind of jump scare moment. And technically it's to represent sonic space as well. Once Creeping Crud comes in, it comes in right after the loud knocks. Overall, I think it's an interesting piece because it reminds me of aleatoric music and something akin to Penderecki sound mass. So it uses bright metallic synths and actually some glass synths and layers them in a way that's very sound mass. And if you don't know what sound mass is, it's notes that are locked very closely together, kind of cluster chords, stuff like that. When you think of a wall of sound hitting you, that's sound mass.
In a state of panic, the teacher on the phone urges Megane not to let anyone on the roof, and in this panic, we hear the chaos on the other end of the phone escalate. I love this shot because the vase is something we've seen once at the beginning of the episode, as well as in this scene with the other teacher. That, coupled with this picture of the person calling Megane's cell being that same flower, we can quickly create this association and realize what's going on without it being too subtle to miss, but also not spelt out for us. Now the anticipation of what's on the other side of the door is a lot more concerning. That is until Megane recognizes Kurumi's voice begging her to unlock the door, letting Kurumi and this guy onto the roof. Now, we already know from the previous episode what this is leading to. This is a nice little touch of dramatic irony, as the characters still have no idea what is going on. As this is happening, Yuki looks down onto the school grounds to see zombies attacking the students. The very blurred vision and lighting creates this feeling of a dream state, tying into the characters' perception, as they're not fully processing everything just yet. The sound design and music also play a pretty interesting role in this shot.
A lot of the time, you are going for realism. You're going for, like, how would this realistically sound? But there are times where the sound design plays a deeper role than just creating the sonic space. When Yuki actually looks over onto the schoolyard, if you're listening with headphones on very, very carefully, Creeping Crud right before that is kind of meandering in some weird atonal kind of piano stuff. But then you get this kind of bright metallic synth that's actually panned to the left, but the screams of the students is panned to the right. Why is that cool? It's cool because, like, it's obviously on purpose. Like, they're trying to emphasize the screams and the big kind of sound mass of the metallic synth coming in and swelling up.
Things are quiet for a moment as the characters are beginning to process what is going on, but the silence is broken by a second knocking at the door, a much slower knocking that creeps into the scene. I love that the different rhythm of this knocking immediately conveys that this is something different, distinctly so. As more rustling sounds add to the slow, unnatural knocks, the glass of the door breaks, revealing multiple hands reaching through it, creating another jarring spike in the sound and flowing into the second track.
So the second track, it's definitely more in line with action music, so it's supposed to get your blood pumping rather than make you uneasy. It's still going to make you uneasy because of the tempo, which is either a variable tempo or it's a variable time signature.
Megane needs to push a locker over to block the door, with Yuri coming to help her hold the zombies back. Megane yells for Yuki to push a washer over to block the door, separating themselves from Kurumi and the boy. This happens right as he begins to turn. The shots from Kurumi's dream sequence from the previous episode are recreated, but now it is very clear that this is not a dream and this is actually happening right before our eyes. Kurumi being left alone and vulnerable with this shadowy figure towering over her is out of options.
It's very effective in getting your heart going, and the interesting thing about it being louder is that there's more quiet leading up to it, and then there's quiet after, and it's way more effective. It's way more powerful for that because you've got this heart pumping, and then you get silence, whack, blood dripping. And very specifically, dripping blood, because the consistency of it is not like water, it's not like anything else there, it's a heavy liquid hitting the floor. And you know everything that you need to know just from that. I could watch that without any of the words, just the music and the sound, and you could know exactly what happened. What's interesting with regard to the sound design is that the knocking comes back right after that. As all that's going on, the knocking comes back, and that just tells you the danger is still present. You may have killed one, but everything's still moving around you. You still are in danger. Like, it's to make sure that you don't get comfortable.
All these cuts to black after each strike are so jarring too, as it not only takes away the visuals, but also the sound. This also allows the reactions from the characters, particularly this shot of Yuki, to stick in our minds for a brief moment after each strike. It does this 3 times before Yuki gets the courage to get up and do what she does best. Now, why did I feel it necessary to talk about this scene in particular in so much depth? Well, because not only does this contain amazing pacing, music, sound design, shot composition, and use of color, but As I said, it's also completely unique to the anime. The manga contains this plot point, but it's not explored beyond a dream sequence that was already adapted and presented in the previous episode. The love and detail that went into creating the scene goes far beyond making things look and sound nice. This moment conveys almost everything we need to know about everyone involved. From how everyone reacts to panic and tragedy to what purpose they fulfill, insights into their personalities, and how they complement one another. Their bond is deeply strengthened after we discover how they came to unite. Not to mention, all the time spent focusing on an event like this further drives home what these characters are going through. Thanks again to That Music Nerd for joining me in this breakdown. If you want to learn more about anime soundtracks from a professional composer, please do give his channel a look. Also, maybe bug him to do more Gakkou Gurashi analysis. But not all is perfect in this adaptation. While I would argue that the flaws are either subjective or minor plot holes that don't affect my enjoyment, there are two things worth addressing. The first thing being the aforementioned changes to Yuri. There's not so much change that actively ruins her as a character. There's only a couple examples you could argue do that. One example being that in the manga, Miki walks in on Yuri attempting to kill Kurumi after she's infected, while in the adaptation, Yuri decides she can't go through with it and drops the knife on her own. I personally don't think this subtle change would really affect where the story goes in the manga, but it does very slightly change her personality. To me, this is more an example of something that could have gone either way rather than something that Yuri actively would not do. However, I would be lying if I said I was completely satisfied with her representation. The big reason why we don't get many examples of Yuri breaking down and showing weakness is part of a bigger change. The last 3 episodes of the anime are a culmination of different arcs and plot points from the manga, and it could have been executed cleaner to say the least. Yuri in these arcs has shown to be resourceful but would easily crack when the pressure was too heavy. By lumping these moments together, we only get a small dose of the character development Yuri was thirsting for. I do understand why they made this change for the sake of the plot overall, however, there's this tension building beneath the prior episode's lighter tone, and things start to go wrong all at once, making these last 3 episodes a much more stressful watch. There are plot holes in this execution, sure. Yuki being told what to do by her own vision of Megane feels a little forced and doesn't really make sense. But I don't get how this ending left people unsatisfied. I believe this ending brought so much to the anime, and it cemented the show as my favorite. One massive change from the manga actually helped significantly in putting this beautiful ending together, and I don't think this change gets enough appreciation. What's this change, you ask? It's the dog. So, believe it or not, Toromaru, aka the dog, exists in the manga for about 1 chapter, and that's it. Honestly, his inclusion is a little confusing. He's only really there to be an example of zombies following patterns from their past lives, and I guess in a way to compare Yuki to a dog. I've often heard the opinion that Toromaru takes up way too much screen time in the anime, considering how small of an impact he had in the manga. Now, this may be a hot take, but I believe Toromaru is partially responsible for one of the most important moments in the show. I know that the dog dying at the end of a movie or show can come off as a shallow way to tug at your heartstrings, but Toromaru's death holds significance. 1, it offers a shared experience of loss with the cast. Even though the loss of Megane was sad in itself, while also being presented super well, it was information brought to us retroactively. The situation with Toromaru is a shared experience, something we follow alongside the characters and lose with them. It creates an empathetic tie between the viewer and the group, and it holds weight because of that screen time as well as everyone's reactions to the unfairness of the world. 2nd, it further emphasizes the cruel nature of the setting. While a big part of the show is about making the best out of bad situations, the other side of that coin contains those unavoidable bad situations. Megane's death establishes that there is something to be lost, and Toromaru's death drives that idea further home. It's not fair because that's what their world is, an unjust world with consequence and loss, and it makes their attempt at pushing forward all the more admirable. 3rd, it creates a parallel between Miki and Yuki, which results in possibly the show's strongest message. This is all the more interesting considering that the only main character to not meet Toromaru in the manga was Miki. The relationship between Miki and this little dog is something she holds a lot of value in. Funny enough, I initially was pretty annoyed with her seeming to worry more about Doromaru than Kurumi in the last episodes. Like, come on, why you gotta do my girl like that? But honestly, it kind of makes sense. Doromaru was with her long before everyone else. He brought the others to save Miki and just began warming back up to her right before he went missing. And once he had died, Miki's left distraught and defeated. She's now lost something as well. She ponders the idea in bottling up her true feelings and suggests that she just send him off with a smile. A concept that's dangerously close to the logic that created Yuki's condition. With Yuki's experience in losing Megane, she at some point chose that path and wandered too far down it. Yuki had realized after making all the progress leading up to this point that she had forgotten Megane's final words. She exchanged such an important memory for blissful optimism.
悲しいことをあんまり我慢してるとね、大切なことを忘れちゃうから。
After realizing how valuable memories are, as well as the importance of being honest with your feelings, she's able to convey that to Miki as well as the viewer. You don't always have to be fine. A heartfelt and important message, thanks in part to this little dog. Rest in peace, little guy. Even though this whole video may come off as me claiming the anime is better in every aspect, I want to make something clear. I not only like that the anime is different for the anime's sake, but also for the mangas. It's so different that it feels like you're experiencing the story all over again. I loved seeing all the alterations and the additional moments that didn't make it into the anime, as well as experiencing this slightly different tone. When something is recreated in a generally superior medium, it may unintentionally leave the original almost worthless by comparison. But thanks to the many changes in the anime, it brought the manga value as well, and despite my preference, I highly recommend that if you like the anime, you check out the manga. To me, it doesn't matter which one is better. What matters is that this willingness to create something different managed to bring value to both. This is, I think, a perfect example of when change is good.